Welcome in, everybody. It is a new episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast. And like always, we are trying to bring in a lot of the guests in, really good and should we say epic guests with these two that we have in. And we are joined into this program with Zach Segars and Patrick, not Chiotti, but he's your favorite Italian that's not named Big Fangio and not named Mario Vitanzi, although they might be butting heads with that one. But Patrick Chiotti, and of course the other host of the program, Matty Molds. You guys can, well, first off, right out of the gate, you guys probably should introduce yourselves.
Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I'm Zach Segars with the C, like the letter, and then Gur, the animal noise, over there at Pro Football Network. That's Zach _Segars on Twitter, ZACH_SEGARS. Repping PFN with Patrick Chiotti, like Don Quixote.
Yeah, at Patrick Chiotti on Twitter, PatrickChiotti, as well over there at Pro Football Network, giving you guys excellent Broncos coverage and analysis. Can also be found on With the First Pick and pigskin.com.
It's also worth noting that it's not Pro Football Talk; it's Pro Football Network.
PFN.
It is PFN.
Yeah, we do good analysis.
Yeah.
It's not like what Mike Florio with the clickbait, right?
No, never. No.
And also these two do. What's worth noting, these two do appear on the Lockdown Broncos podcast with Cody as well. I know I've done some episodes with them before, so of course the chemistry's there, and of course with the chemistry with Maddie. And Maddie, how are you doing, my man?
Hey, I'm great, man. I've got a plethora of drinks. I just sent out a tweet. I've got some Long Branch that I'm sipping on. I just made a Negroni. And, of course, I got the water because, you do radio or whatever. You do media, you need a little H2O. But, so if I got to get up and relieve myself, it's probably because I overindulge. So no worries. But
well, sometimes, there's podcasts that just might take a little bit more than H2O.
Hey, Matt. I'll have to send you over some good whiskey, man, because I do a podcast out here with some buddies of mine for the semi-pro league that's out here, and we have a new whiskey of the week every week. So I'll have to send you some good recommendations.
Hey, send those my way too, Patrick.
If you need a guest to appear on that thing, I will gladly join you. Oh man,
we got you.
It doesn't matter if it's Irish or Scotch or I don't get into ryes, but man, bourbons, give me all the brown sugar. Let's go.
Same with bourbons. Yep. Absolutely.
Love it.
All right. So obviously, guys, the game, because let's kind of get into it. The game really didn't exactly go the way that Broncos country would have hoped against the Tennessee Titans. It was competitive. I mean, it was a competitive defensive battle. But at the same time, it was really sloppy on both sides. I mean, it felt like the Tennessee Titans didn't want to win the football game, and it felt like the Denver Broncos didn't want to win the football game. But I mean, at the same time, based on everything as far as the expectations and everything else, it seemed like it was just pretty slow out of the gate.
Yeah, I mean, it did seem that way, and I actually touched on this with we actually touched on this with Cody a couple weeks ago. What is this first week going to look like? And honestly, across the league, you kind of saw it was either like these super high scoring games because defense was just not that good or other things like that, or you're going to see these lower scoring games like we saw with Denver and Tennessee where things are going to be a little more sloppy. It's going to take a lot of time for things to start to get clicking. Overall, I felt like you're absolutely right. You hit it on the head, man. Tennessee just simply did not want to win the football game. Giving Derrick Henry the ball 31 times is insane. But 4 missed kicks, plenty of opportunities for them to take advantage of certain situations, and it just didn't turn out that way. Unfortunately, Denver couldn't take advantage of those situations either on the flip side, and I think that was the most frustrating thing, going into halftime with a 7-7 score when really it should have been a much higher score going into the half.
It really should have been, and I think that going back to just the mistakes, that Melvin Gordon fumble was such a killer. And then also going for it on fourth and not being able to convert there. You have their second drive, they drive down, score. And then the fourth drive, they drive down and they're in scoring position. And, you have the fourth down miscue. You have a Locke miss, a wide open Nick Vannett in the end zone. And so then that third drive in between, that's right when the offense is rolling. And that one got snuffed out before it could even start with Melvin Gordon's fumble that gave the Titans life when they absolutely had none up until that point in the game. Overall, though, I came away feeling there's more things I feel good about in regards to the Broncos than there are things I feel bad about after that game. And I just think they had a few really ugly moments. They had ugly moments. There were more pretty moments than ugly moments, but the ugly ones were really, really ugly, and it ended up costing them the game.
The biggest thing that I saw too, honestly, from the Broncos offense as a whole was the lack of timing. You saw Drew just kind of like at times, take that pause that, he's trying to process everything and really not pulling the trigger. The footwork, again, like this is something that was one of the biggest concerns when he came out of Missouri was how consistent is that footwork going to be, and can he make it better? And I saw a lot of snaps from him where he was kind of shuffling his feet a lot, which on one side that's fine, but on the other side, you want, if he's going to be shuffling his feet like that and having that happy feet, you want to see him step into the throw and really drive it. And I felt like he was kind of just throwing, trying to make that sidearm throw, the off the back foot throw a lot, and just not feeling very confident in himself. And that's where we saw like the overthrow to Vannett. Like that's a simple throw. It's so easy for a guy like Drew Lock. It's a gimme, right? And for that ball to sail, that tells me that he threw it off his back foot. His arm probably swung out wide, and he tried to put a little too much touch on the ball. So those are things that just needed to be cleaned up. And I think that, Drew's a competitor. He's a film room guy. So he's going to get in the film room. He's going to look at things and he's going to say, okay, here's what I did wrong. Here's what I need to improve upon. And he's going to fix it. Week to week, he's gotten better throughout his 6 games in the NFL. That's all he's played. And he did play a great game. I'm not going to sit here and say that, Drew Lock didn't have a great game, because playing against even a defense like Tennessee, who, it's not the biggest and baddest defense. Their pass defense was one of the worst in the league last year, but their rushing defense was one of the best in the league last year. He played pretty well. So I'm happy about some things. I'm concerned about some other things. I felt like that was the general consensus coming away.
Yeah, there were some things to be happy about, obviously, but I do have that plethora of drinks because some things were not so pretty. The big elephant in the room, right? At the very end of the game, right? The clock management and how the timeouts were used or not used, right? So, like, do we get to start next game with 5 timeouts? Is that how this works?
No, I just think that's like, it's a little overrated, in my opinion, just how important that was. I just don't think it's what lost the Broncos the game. I think Locke's sale to Vannett honestly cost them the game more, or like going for it on 4th and 1 and not converting there. Again, not taking the timeout there is a bad call in hindsight, but if you use the timeouts, then maybe Tennessee has enough time to score a touchdown, or at least consider maybe we want to go for it on 4th. We don't trust Gostkowski now, because you could see he was in his head on that third miss. When Harris got on his third miss, Harris got penetration, got the hand up, and you saw him hook it left to avoid that. So I think this put the Titans in an uncomfortable situation. You even saw Vrabel having to use timeouts because he wanted the Broncos to be using them, or at least he used a timeout. So in hindsight, should they have used one? Absolutely, but I just don't think it's the pivotal game losing moment. It seemed to become narratively in hindsight.
Let me tell you, as a coach, it pained me to see 2 seconds on the clock and hear the words "charged with their first timeout." That was painful to see. For me, it was like it was sort of a what the heck is going on type of moment when Henry runs the ball and you literally just let almost 30 seconds run off the clock before anything's done. This is, I understand that Vic is going into his second year as a head coach, but dude, you have so much experience in the NFL as a coordinator and as a coach. You have to understand what type of situation you're in. Look at last year. I believe it was the Chargers game when Locke just threw up that Hail Mary to Sutton and got the PI. That's a prime example of at least giving him something. Because at that point, there was less than a minute left, or less than 30 seconds left in the game, and we were still able to at least make some sort of drive out of it. You have to be able to give your offense something, more than 17 seconds, but something. So it was frustrating for me to see the misuse of the timeouts. I'm not saying that it was the reason they lost the game, because there were plenty of opportunities that they could have had earlier in the game to boost the score up. But that's a glaring problem for me when you're looking at the coaching staff, because you do have a guy who is so experienced. And that's like the biggest thing that's talked about is we have the coaching staff in the NFL that has the most years of combined experience in the league as coaches. And we're out there making rookie mistakes. It's not what we need to win football games right now. We need that experience to come in hand.
And I think too, one of the other key things was that third quarter. I mean, we talked, about all the other things too, and the Broncos rarely even touched the ball in the third quarter, at all. And when they did, it was pathetic. I mean, they didn't really even move the ball. And so a bunch of the other things I think were key factors. The timeouts, the Melvin Gordon fumble. I think one of the things was just that third quarter. Now, granted, when the Tennessee Titans scored that touchdown, or when they scored the touchdown, and they went back and they scored the field goal to take the lead, 14-13. I mean, that was a really good response. I mean, and maybe one of the positive takeaways for me of this game, and it was my silver lining of the game was the fact that you had the youngest offense in the National Football League go toe to toe with an AFC air quote potential divisional winner of the AFC South. Now, granted, we can talk about the AFC South because it is a little bit wide open potentially after week one and all the question marks there. But I mean, overall, there were still some good positives. And I do think, though, it still falls under timing. And I mean, it was inexcusable. I think the ending with Vic was really inexcusable. And maybe it still falls under the timing with just the entire team. I don't know, and I don't want to use as necessarily as an excuse, because it is, to my opinion, it's a little bit inexcusable. But I mean, there were still a lot of things to glean from. One in particular, even though it was the third quarter, Josie Jewell showed up in the third quarter. Of all the quarters, he showed up.
Josie Jewell was great. And again, the clock management hurt him. I just think, at least maybe it's just the Fire Fangio stuff is just giving me a migraine headache. And so I'm exhausted by it. But it's like, to Patrick's point, this is the most experienced coaching staff in the league. And is Fangio struggling with time management? Absolutely. And it's something he has to work on. But Andy Reid struggled with that for 10, 15 years and was a great, great head coach. Hopefully Fangio figures it out quicker. He needs to. But when you look at what he did for the Broncos defensively, I think he kept the Broncos in that game with his defensive play calling more than he killed them by screwing up the timeouts at the end of the game. With that said, I think there's plenty of positives you can take from it. Josie Jewell might have even looked better than Todd Davis. He was incredible stopping the run. Michael Ojemudia, the rookie cornerback, everyone's going to focus on the pass interference that was the dagger in that game, but he played a great game. And if that ticky-tack Alexander Johnson unnecessary roughness isn't called, he has to play the game with that interception. Ridiculous call. But there's just so many positive things. Again, I think like Justin Simmons had a bad game, but at most areas, Draymond Jones looked fantastic. Jarrell Casey looked really good. Bradley Chubb was a little disappointing. But Jeremiah Tachu did a great job of filling in for Von Miller. He's not going to be Von Miller, but he did as good of a job. I charted like 1 sack, 5 pressures, and almost a second sack. That was almost a strip sack as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think, and that's just on defense. Then on the offense, you look at I wasn't all that impressed by Drew Lock, but Melvin Gordon looks like a really good signing. Noah Fant looks like he's taken that big second-year leap. Jerry Jeudy looks the part. The drops are concerning, but everything else you'd want him to do, he did and looked good. The change of direction, the quickness, the athleticism. Tim Patrick did well. I just think Garrett Bowles did freaking well. We're complaining, but Garrett Bowles had the best game of his career. I think there's a lot of positives.
Pump the brakes because we're going to get to the game balls here. Maddie needs to talk.
Yeah, so I mean, the field management stuff, the clock management's one thing, but also field management. What you talk about, all the experience we have on the head coaching or on our coaching staff, and Pat Shurmur was a head coach, right? And he's also our offensive coordinator. So you think he would be hey, I might need a little more time than 17 seconds to get us a shot. Something else that a bone I have to pick with him, we had a drive where we were around midfield and it was 3rd down and long. And we tried something. It was like a throw way downfield when we could have gotten 4 or 5 yards and given the guy that we just gave a 4-year, $17 million extension to an opportunity to hit a field goal to give us some breathing room, right? We didn't put McManus in any type of position. And with his leg in Denver, it's inexcusable for him not to, in a couple of those situations, to at least get a shot. And so you could go back and look at that. I mean, our punter, we actually had good punt play, which was kind of new for a change.
That was an underrated point.
Game balls. Let's save it.
Right. So, I mean, our special teams played well. I would have liked McManus to have gotten a 50-something yard shot there. And I'm not just talking about at the end of the game. So,
yeah.
I don't know if Shurmur was maybe on the edge of his seat, come call a timeout. I need something.
Yeah.
But even if that was the case and Fangio overrode him, we still had another chance to get 3 points earlier in the game, and then we had poor management of our down and distance on 3rd down from midfield. So nobody is safe.
And that's the biggest thing too. That's what concerns me is was Shurmur in Fangio's ear saying hey, you need to call timeout. You need to call timeout. You need to call timeout. And Vic just either ignored him or was no, we're fine. We're fine. That's, obviously we're not going to know, but that's what I would like to know because it seems like
in his press
go ahead.
Sorry. In his press conference, it did sound like, no one said anything. It kind of sounded like Vic was oh yeah, I just forgot about it in the moment. Who knows? Again, like you're saying, we'll never know, but yeah.
Well, and you just never know even with those press conferences because they may be trying to save face.
Yeah,
I mean
exactly.
And I don't know. But I mean, all in all, it was just a really Let me just start first. It was a really bizarre game because for one, it felt very, very similar to the Bears game, whether it was the score or whether it was just the whole defensive battle. But I mean, from start to finish, I mean. The defense kept them in the game. The offense was at least doing somewhat enough to put the points that they needed on the board, but not nearly enough. And I mean, and for Drew Lock's sake, maybe there were just times where he was just too cautious with the football.
Yes.
And for Shurmur, I mean, they gave him those options early to give him some confidence, but at the same time, there really were no deep shots as far as for Locke. So as far as him throwing these deep passes and overthrowing Hamilton and everything else, I mean, maybe those were all timing, but it was just, I just think that those are just things that people could be looking back on. And obviously, with overreaction Tuesday that it was with always week one. Yeah.
And it's going to be worse than ever this year, because we haven't had any preseason, or we haven't seen like the offense struggle in the preseason or anything. This is the only football we have. And so it's like, the fire Fangio, the all the overreaction stuff, that's a little ridiculous.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I do want to say like there are some positive things to take from it for sure. It was a bizarre game. I will say this though, like, it looks a little different because we still had a chance to win. We should have never even been in that game. Like, we were dominated pretty much that whole game. In my mind, they left 10 points, on the field. And I know you got to make the kick. I get it. But it wasn't like it was these were 60-yard kicks. These were like kicks that most pro kickers should make, to include an extra point.
It's also should be noted that the last time that Gostkowski kicked in Denver, he struggled as well. So, maybe it's just the guy can't kick in Denver. Maybe the field is messing with him, or there's some light on that specific end of the field that's just messing with him. But he cannot kick in Denver. It's been that way since the AFC Championship game when he was with New England. He just can't do it. Like you guys said, there are a lot of positive takeaways from this. Drew Lock was a bit cautious. That is something that I kind of expected it to be. This is the first game. Like Zach said, no preseason, no real time to, see another defense and play against that. So that timing is all going to really be on the fly. We all know that Drew Lock has an absolute hose of an arm. Those deep shots, for me, it's like, okay, I understand we're taking the deep shots. You have to do that because you have to make the secondary respect it, right? He's got to be able to not just be a strong arm. He's got to be a strong arm with the touch. So the throw to Hamilton, I've seen a lot of people saying Hamilton gave up on the route and blah, blah, blah. The fact of the matter is that ball was overthrown and it was going out of bounds anyways. So whether
he was stopping or not,
whether he stopped or not, he's not getting that ball. If the first shot to Jerry Jeudy, if that ball is put where it should have been in Judy's breadbasket, Jeudy takes a huge shot there. Luckily, that ball was overthrown. I didn't think that it was a good pass on me personally. As a wide receiver, I would be yelling at my quarterback, like, what the heck are you doing, man? You're trying to get me killed. But overall, I think that I would rather take Drew being cautious with the ball and not turning it over, which he should have had a couple of interceptions. Let's be honest here. There were a couple balls that he threw that he got lucky that they were dropped. But I would rather have him be cautious and take care of the football than be overly aggressive and actually, throw those interceptions, try to squeeze the ball into tight windows like he did against LA in his first start. He tried to make a throw that it wasn't there. It was a rookie throw. And it's always going to come back to that was this guy's 6th game in the NFL. So,
yeah. And I think on the aggressiveness, I think we honestly want Locke to play like he did last night and kind of in that Chargers game, the in-between. We've seen him be too aggressive like he was in the Chiefs game, and we've seen him be way too cautious like he was in the Lions and Raiders games. I think when he's been aggressive before, like in the Texans game, he was super aggressive in that game. He was taking crazy shots, and it just paid off. When he's hot, he's hot. I think we kind of knew this about him as a prospect. He's a little inconsistent. The one thing I want to circle back to is just the point about the Broncos getting dominated by the Titans. I just disagree. I don't think it was all that one-sided. Even with the kicks, like, yes, if you tack those kicks on for the Titans, it's a 23-14 game and it's not all that close. However, I think if you take away the Melvin Gordon fumble, that was at least a 7-point swing, and it might have been a 14-point swing. Because like I said, second drive Broncos, score a touchdown. Fourth drive, the Broncos get all the way down to the 1 yard line. That was the point in this game when the offense was rolling and looking at its best. And Melvin Gordon killed that drive with a fumble, and it led to an immediate Titans touchdown when they were doing nothing beforehand. So, and again, when you look at like yards, Titans outgained the Broncos by 50. They had like 20 more plays, which is kind of just their style of offense, 7 more first downs. To your point, they outplayed the Broncos. They had 32 minutes of possession. They outplayed the Broncos, but I don't think it was like this domination. I think the Broncos really had held their own with, like Cam said, a team that should be right now the favorite in the AFC South with how the Texans and Colts looked. Like Cam also said, youngest offense in the league, a team down their best defensive player, best offensive player. I'm honestly just really impressed with how the Broncos did, though there were plenty of ugly moments. I just think there were just some insanely ugly moments. The Jeudy drops, the lack of timeouts being used, the lock overthrows that are just going to stick in your mind and make the game seem especially ugly. But I think they held their own. The
Jeudy drops hurt. They hurt.
They did.
And I mean, when you have a guy, and he was open on all the drops.
Oh, yeah.
He was open on them.
Wide open.
And those are, I'm going to chalk it up to, he's a rookie. It's his first NFL game. As a receiver, you just gotta, you gotta move on. You gotta move on to the next play. You can't keep thinking about it, because if you keep thinking about it, it's just going to happen over and over and over again. He's got to have that next play mentality.
And I think that's probably at least maybe while I really liked the comment, earlier, at least today when he was talking, and he said that, what is the biggest takeaway you're going to be taking away from the Monday night game? And he said the 2 drops. I think that has its positives and it has its negatives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that, for Jeudy, you're looking at it from the standpoint that those are great, because that shows that is something that you're going to take away and something that you're going to be working on. And knowing Jeudy, he's probably going to end up working on it, because we've seen it all through, from what we heard in high school to what we'd seen in college, and then what we certainly saw, at least in the explosive spurts last night or on Monday night. I mean, the kid is really special. But at the same time, to what Pat said, saying just those 2 drops, you don't want to at least linger on those, because you want to just make sure that you're just not mentally just thinking about those every single play.
Exactly. And that's, if he's going to say that that's his biggest takeaway from the game, then yeah, you're absolutely right. He's going to be working on that, hit the jug machine, work on catching that ball over the middle. The biggest thing though is watching those 2 drops. It was really him, the ball hit him in the hands and he just turned his head. And that's like for me, that is just a rookie wide receiver trying to make a play without the ball secured in your hand. Watch the ball in first, get the ball, tuck it, and then make the move.
Yeah. On Monday night, under the bright lights against the team that was in the AFC Championship game, and there were big moments too, when I just think it was a little, maybe not nerves, but just, I need to get this first down. I need to make sure I'm turning a field. He was going a little, he just seemed like he was playing a little too fast, with those drops. And then also even on his first catch, which was a good route and a good thing, he stumbled a little bit because he wanted to break that dude's ankle so bad. The one thing you don't want to see is you don't want to see what happened to Gostkowski happen to Jeudy, where it's just yips and confidence and you start overthinking it, and then they start piling up and you start overthinking it more and whatnot. Not that that'll happen. And Patrick knows more about playing a wide receiver than I do, but that's just the one thing I worry about. Oh, and Cam, of course, does.
I told Cam I was going to give him some pointers next time I came out to Denver.
Yeah,
one of them is
you're going to get Cam. You're going to get Cam looking like Jeudy out there breaking ankles.
Hey, first we need to get started on the jugs machine, and then
got it. Hey, it all starts in the weight room, man. It all starts in the weight room.
Yeah, Clydesdale.
Yeah. Hey, let's give out some game balls, man.
All right, some game balls. So one of the things obviously, I would probably just go right off the bat. right, and just say that Noah Fant probably is one of the deserving guys right off the bat for game ball. You're talking about a guy that I've kind of compared a little bit early on in his career to what Demaryius Thomas had kind of encountered his entire career. Just a guy that had been hated like early on in his Bronco career, and with everything that he had, well, I would maybe just his majority of his career, but I mean, just the fact that in particular, the play that probably would be a Mahomes throw heard around the world, the fact with that Fant play, that was one of the key things that he really needed to work on, especially coming into this season. A guy that could use that body, use that big frame, and become like a basketball player, box the guy out. And while it may have been a smart play for Locke to see a potential flag there, I mean, that was still a really great play by Noah Fant to use the mental side, which was another part of the aspect for Fant that we're kind of looking into with this season too as well.
So what you're telling me is Noah Fant boxed a guy out and made a huge catch that ended up being one of the biggest plays for the Broncos. Last year in the game against Houston, he did the exact same thing. We saw the type of tight end that Noah Fant could be, early on in that game when Locke threw that pass, and he literally boxed out the safety or the DB and had that huge run after the catch. That is the type of player that we want to see Noah Fant be. We want to see him make that contested catch. We want to see him be the force in the red zone, the tight end that can really make the big play after the catch. And we saw that. We saw that on Monday night. I mean, he was not trying to go out of bounds. Whenever Noah Fant had the ball, he was trying to stay in bounds and get as many yards as possible after the catch. And that's exactly what we have needed. His athleticism, his size, his catching ability, they are all pluses. And for him to have that aggressive mindset of like, no, I'm not just going to go out of bounds and avoid a big shot. I'm going to lower my shoulder and I'm going to put you in the dirt and I'm going to get 10 more yards after the catch. Noah Fant absolutely deserving of that game ball.
For sure. And watching him, I actually do agree with Cam on the physicality point. I think that's a big area of his game that needed to improve from last year, in blocking and everything else. I just think he didn't utilize that size enough. We saw flashes of it, like Pat's saying, especially in the Browns game where he ran that dude over. We all know the play. But it wasn't consistent enough. I don't know if it was just the way he played last night, but he looked physically larger to me as well. He certainly played like it. He was running guys over, was not shying away from contact at all. Looked like, when Kelsey was starting to come onto the scene and people were calling him Baby Gronk, like, oh, there's up and coming tight end in Kansas City. It's Baby Gronk. That's what I kept thinking of with Fant against the Titans. Like, oh, look, it's Baby Gronk. That's just everything, the size, the strength, the physicality, the speed. If he gets going, and I think part of the reason he fell off in the second half, only getting one target, is because the Titans were able to divert more of their defensive assets towards stopping him. And once Sutton's back, you won't be able to do that anymore. And you're going to have to choose, which guy are the safeties helping over the top with? Because you can only pick one. And if you pick to double Sutton, Fant's going to eat you alive now. And if you choose to double Fant, Sutton's going to eat you alive. And then once Judy comes along, gets that working on the jugs machine, we saw him getting wide open last night. And he was facing I know Jackson was out, so it was the Titans' number 2 corner still, but he was facing their best cornerback with Sutton out, and he was getting open all the time. So I think once this offense gets rolling, we knew it was going to be rusty early on. John Elway even told us, and he's the guy who said Joe Flacco was in his prime. We knew it was going to be a little rusty early on, but man, the promise is there, and Noah Fant's the Jenga piece making it so.
Let's start handing out some more game balls.
Matt, who you got?
Yeah, you take it.
Yeah, so like we mentioned him earlier, like if this was your first year watching Broncos football, like number 72, you didn't hear his name all night. Like, and I'm the biggest Garrett Bowles hater, and I'll go on record and say it. Like, yes, he came on towards the end of last year when Locke was under center, and we didn't have a statue throwing the football, and we're able to open a few things up, right? And maybe Shermer's offense is going to help that situation a little bit. But I gotta say, man, like Garrett Bowles, they lined up Clowney on that side some, and Clowney disappeared. Now, some of it may be because Clowney's conditioning maybe isn't where it needs to be, because dude didn't have a camp either. He was just signed like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. But maybe the game looked a little different if they had, say, a Beasley. But I just got to go off of what I saw. Man, Bowles played a completely clean game. I couldn't say the same thing about the right side of our offensive line, but definitely on that left side, like Locke didn't have to worry about his blind side pretty much all night.
It was honestly refreshing. Like it was honestly refreshing not to hear a penalty called on 72. Because we all know that feeling. Big play, huge play downfield, the crowd's roaring. There goes the flag, holding number 72 on the offense. Not a single time. And man, watching him go up against Clowney was so satisfying, because so many people before this game said that Clowney was going to be the biggest factor for the Tennessee defense. And Garrett Bowles, God bless his soul, put on 20 pounds of weight. He's been working with Munchak. He absolutely sunned Clowney a couple of times in that game, and he just shut him down. And it was so great. It was so refreshing to see, because he struggled with those guys that were more of the power rushers. He struggled with the guys that utilized the bull rush or the bull and rip. And it was nice to see him finally just stonewall someone. So maybe he's coming along a little bit further than we expected him to come along. I know he's going to be fighting for that second contract, and this was a great game for him to come out and say, look at what I can do now.
And to that point, I think he has a good opportunity to put the Broncos in a very uncomfortable place at the end of the season. And we'll get a good idea of what it's going to be next week, because he's got TJ Watt and Bud Dupree on the horizon. And that's going to be that's a lot harder than Jadeveon Clowney and Harold Landry. So we'll see. That'll give us a better idea. With that said, the Broncos are going to have to figure out what's scarier, having finally figured out Bowles and finally got him playing like a good tackle, and letting him walk out the door, or paying him a huge tackle deal like tackles get nowadays, because a good tackle is so hard to find, even harder to find than a good quarterback, I'd argue. Do you give him a big tackle deal and then, now it's not a contract season, I can hold 27 times again? I think that's an uncomfortable spot to be in. And it goes back to John Elway not extending that 5th-year option because it costs you almost nothing. And it's just like, hey, it's safe. You should almost always extend the 5th-year option. And I think it was an underrated bad move when he didn't do it. And after this first game, it's looking even worse.
I think it begs the question, because Bowles is an older player. Like he's nearing the end of his rookie contract, and he's about to be 30 before we know it. So it begs the question, with a weak offensive tackle market as far as free agency goes, and more of a rich offensive tackle draft class coming out, with teams not necessarily being in, I can't think of a lot of teams off the top of my head that necessarily need to sign a free agent offensive tackle. Does it beg the question, do we just sign Bowles to like a 2-year contract or a 2-year deal that's very incentivized, and then draft someone maybe in the top 3 rounds, and say, all right, you're going to duke it out with this guy, prove that really prove that you've earned this contract? Because let's be honest here, one season of really good play does not make up for the 4 seasons, the 3 seasons of very, very below average play, if I'm being completely honest.
Well, and even too with Garrett Bowles, what was one of the huge determining things of Garrett Bowles at the beginning of a season? He's always struggled at the beginning of a season. Like he has always struggled at the beginning of the season. And so to see him come out and for the first time ever in his career go out and ball on that first game should at least only give him that much confidence going into each and every single week. And so maybe this is that exact game, that first game where he can just go out and he can perform at the highest level. And I do agree with Pat. I think that with Bowles, that's one of the things that I've internally felt. I feel like Bowles, that even though he may go out and outplay his contract potentially, I mean, I still, even if you're Garrett Bowles and everything else, I still think the smart decision is to still take a prove a deal, whether that's that 1 year, 2 year deal, just something that you can potentially still build yourself up, build your reputation up, to potentially be that tackle that you can earn that, to his age, that final contract.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's going to be tough. It's just, if Pat's right and you can get him, if market value dictates you can get Bulls for a 2-year incentive heavy deal, you're doing backflips if you're the Broncos, because that saves your butt so bad. Because I think there's a good opportunity. We get to the end of the season and Bulls is commanding a $10+ million a year salary, and do you want to take that gamble? I mean, honestly, what's worse, taking the gamble, ending up with just another, maybe not a Jawan James situation because that one's so different, but just another tackle, maybe a Menelik Watson situation to take it back, or a Donald Stevenson situation? Or do you let him walk out the door, end up signing with the Philadelphia Eagles or who knows who, and end up being a star? Like, I don't know. It's a very uncomfortable spot to be in. And yeah.
That's a real who's who of offensive tackle signings that we've had.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I gotta go stick my fingers down my throat and relieve myself of that. That's awful. Hey,
remember, just think about Jared Valdir and Edvin Mathis, the two defense.
Luis Vasquez comes to mind.
Luis Vasquez was good too. Orlando, he was a draft pick.
Orlando Franklin was a draft pick. Clady was a draft pick.
Here's a story I've never told on air before. When I was a kid, I went to a Nuggets game and Orlando Franklin was there. And I asked him for an autograph, and he gave me an autograph and signed it "Go Broncos" and put a silent E at the end. And I still have the ball. Broncos with an E. And that was always funny to me.
The Broncos.
Not to bring it to a grinding halt. My game ball would go to Michael Ojemudia, just to keep things rolling. I was really impressed with how well he did. That was quick, and maybe he wasn't deserving of it. I went with my gut on that one. But I thought
you go ahead and explain yourself, Zach.
I'll explain myself. We got a rookie cornerback, and Pat knows this. Cornerbacks struggle in the transition from college to the NFL more than just about any position. Quarterbacks are up there, offensive linemen are up there. It's one of the biggest leaps in terms of how difficult that transition is. Not only did he do it as a day one starter, he did it in the time of coronavirus, and he did a dang good job in the first half. Second half dropped off a bit, but he didn't have A.J. Bouye helping him. He was asked to be the dominant number one outside cornerback from day one, and it was up and down. But I thought there were more ups and downs, and I was impressed. I came away going, this isn't an Isaac Yiadom situation. This isn't a Brendan Langley situation. This guy can play, and he's going to be starting for the Broncos for a long time.
And low-key, too, with Ojemudia, that was a huge game, too, for him, at least for Broncos country on the surface, because how many people, myself included, had the Michael Ojemudia selection in the NFL draft, knowing how many corners were out there and were available in that round, or in all the rounds of them to take, and they took Michael Ojemudia. I mean,
I thought he was a mid-late fourth round.
Here's the thing. When you're looking at players to draft, yes, it's important to look at physical traits and everything like that. It's more important to find someone who fits the bill of the system, right? Ojemudia is and I hate to use this term because a zone coverage corner is basically a glorified safety. Okay. Ojemudia is a typical zone coverage cornerback. And in Fangio's system, he works perfectly. He keeps everything in front of him. He is quick to come down on the ball. We saw it on that crucial 3rd and 7. He came down hard on Jonnu Smith and had the pass breakup. And he is a physical corner. So Zach bringing up Isaac Yiadom. Yiadom was a physical press corner who didn't really thrive in that zone environment. But looking at Ojemudia's game, I'm not saying that he didn't play a great game, Zach. I'm not. I loved that he was aggressive out of the gate. He showed why he deserved to be picked that high. He was the fourth most. I bring this up in my articles all the time about him. He was the fourth most athletic cornerback in the NFL draft class, according to the relative athletic score over at PFN, over Jeff Okudah.
Which is a good metric.
Which is a great metric. And it wasn't, this guy ran a 4.40. He's a bigger cornerback. So, he's a guy that really does fit the Vic Fangio system, and he played just like it. It was seamless. Granted, in that second half, without Bouye, it was noticeable to see the struggles. Obviously the pass interference comes to mind. It might have been a ticky-tack call. It is what it is, but you got to be smarter than that late in games, and especially in that situation. The giving up that Brown catch at midfield, make sure the guy's down first, because even if that did turn out to be, he wasn't down, Ojemudia got up and he kind of, he showed a little bit of emotion, and Brown started running. It's just things like that really show like, okay, this guy needs more experience playing. The other thing that stood out to me, he gave up a touchdown. He gave up that last play before they kicked the game-winning field goal. That should have been a touchdown. Tannehill, luckily for Ojemudia, barely overthrew that pass. He got burned.
That's true.
Yes. And I'm not saying that, I'm going to give it to AJ Brown because he's got more experience. He's a gifted receiver, and I understand that. For Ojemudia, it's about having that poise and knowing the situation and knowing where you are on the field. I felt like he kind of lunged at Brown, which Brown's a bigger physical guy. Wait for him to come to you and at least contest the catch. But he got burned on that one. I wouldn't give him my game ball. I think that he played fantastic. If it wasn't for AJ's, BS unnecessary roughness call, he probably would have been the best Bronco.
Yeah, one of the heroes of the game. And I would just point out the interception to defend myself, and also just I think a lot of those mistakes, right? They were bad mistakes, but they're rookie mistakes, and it was a rookie playing his opening game on Monday Night Football. I think that shouldn't be the fact that it is Monday Night Football. I think it kind of negatively affected the young Broncos. It seemed like they got the jitters a few times in the game. But yeah, I just think, like you're saying, the lunging at AJ Brown there on the goal line, the not making sure he's fully down, those types of things just seem kind of like rookie mistakes to me, and the kinds of things he'll learn as things go on. And so I agree, up and down, but he was a guy that it's like absolutely, but like from day one, it looks like the Broncos should have a starter for the foreseeable future, at least for the rest of his rookie deal.
I'll give out my game ball here. Sam Martin. Okay. The punter. Look, it's been so long since we've had. Yeah, punters are people too. # for the brand.
For the brand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, it was painful to watch Colby Wadman struggle in Denver. It was painful to see Marquette King not be the original Marquette King. It was so refreshing to finally see a punter, and like you said, Matt, a special teams unit as a whole really have an effect on the game. Pinning Tennessee within the 20, just the punt. The punt direction was fantastic. It's everything that we've wanted because special teams really, as a coach, I preach this all the time. Offense doesn't win games. Defense doesn't win games. Special teams wins games. And if you can win on special teams, more than likely you are going to win the game. So my game ball goes to Sam Martin.
And I love it. You had him through 3 punts last night. His punting average was 10 yards better than what Wadman was for the Broncos last year. That forces the opposing offense to get an extra first down on all their drives, to get into field goal range, to get a touchdown. So that's huge. And then also his average ended up coming down, but it's because on his last 2 punts he had to punt it short to get them stuck inside the 10 and inside the 20. I think, most underrated move of the offseason. And Pat's right. It's going to be huge for this Broncos defense. You know, you look at how many close games they lost. Now those teams, and yes, they lost another one on Monday night, but those teams are now going to have to go 5 to 10 yards further to get into those big field goal situations, to get that late touchdown. And against Vic Fangio's defense, 10 yards is hard to come by.
Yeah, I tell you, those are the types of things, just special teams in general, that are just game changers. And I mean, I think Sam Martin and Garrett Bowles were probably the 2 people not probably talked about a whole lot as far as people that were probably deserving of a game ball, because a lot of the attention went to all the other people. But I mean, for especially a move like a Sam Martin, I mean, I just think that, you know, you have to look at it from the standpoint of, you know, again, just the punting situation was just a little bit, you know, dire in the past. Now, as far as looking out to this very next game, like what to expect, where exactly do the Broncos going into Pittsburgh? I will say this, because we probably should have made the point earlier. If the Broncos had Courtland Sutton, they win the game, and so there's a good likelihood they will have not just Courtland Sutton, but they will also have KJ Hamler. So what are we expecting from the Broncos against the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Matt, you go ahead.
Matt, you go. You've been.
I feel like we've been talking this whole. It's like a PFN.
I know. PFN takeover.
My goal and Matty's goal is to just expose you guys, man. I mean, you guys are our guests.
We appreciate it. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah. So the guy that I'm focused on is Deontay Johnson for the Steelers. I play a lot of daily fantasy. So follow me at Matty Mills Pod if you want to win some money this year.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be playing a lot of Deontay this week. Look, money doesn't have feelings, and it doesn't care that I'm a Broncos fan. So I'm just playing the best matchups. And you know what? Like, we got Big Ben going home. And granted, home looks a little different now without fans, but still it's Big Ben playing in Pittsburgh. Gone is Connor. He's probably not playing, right? It's Benny Snell week. Juju looks every bit as good as Juju has looked before last year, when he had people literally pulled off the street to play quarterback, or pulled out of a duck blind or whatever to go play quarterback for the Steelers. Deontay Johnson got most of their air yards and most of the market share of targets. Where is he going to be lining up? Well, AJ Bouye is out. So in all intents and purposes, are we putting Callahan on the outside? Is Callahan going to be going one-on-one against Juju? That I don't like that. If he stays inside, then we've got, you know, a severe mismatch. Is Ojemudia going to be using his size to go against Juju? Well, if that's the case, then who do we have that's actually going to be matching up with Deontay? I'll take. You think Callahan goes outside to play against Deontay Johnson?
He was playing outside.
I think if that's what
he was playing outside in base, in base coverage, or in their base defensive package, Callahan was playing outside a lot.
And he's more comfortable.
Yeah, and don't forget, like Devontae Bowsby's back, so he is back this week. So that, you know, granted, we don't know exactly where he's going to be at as far as, you know, his level of play, and if he can keep that same style of play that he had last year. Don't get me wrong, I share the same concern with you, because, you know, like you said, Deontay Johnson got he got the most targets on the team. He was targeted 10 times, whereas Juju was targeted 6 times, and you know, he spread the ball out a little bit. And it is concerning because we don't know where Bowsby is. But yeah, I do see Bryce Callahan being that guy that takes on Deontay Johnson in that speed threat. I'm a little concerned about. Yeah, I am concerned about the secondary. Justin Simmons didn't have the best game. Kareem Jackson had a good game, but not having Bouye, not having that real experience, from the second and third cornerbacks, that is going to be a problem. And with Ben kind of, back to being Big Ben for now, it is concerning. It's kind of fearful. Without James Conner, I feel a little bit more confident because I'm happy with where our run defense is at. The pass defense is what concerns me.
I agree with Matt that, target the Steelers receivers this week in fantasy. I would just be targeting Juju and not Deontay Johnson or James Washington. I think with the Sang Bassey, with Bryce Callahan, you have the guys to take on the little speed threats. Even if Bryce Callahan has to move outside to do that, yes, he's more comfortable in the slot. He's a good coverage guy. He's just a good coverage man. I'm not worried about him with the little guy. I don't think you're going to force him to stay in the slot and take on the famously big and strong Juju Smith-Schuster, because that's a horrible mismatch. Ojemudia is, familiar with playing in the slot. I think we see him play there. It's kind of a big slot option to counter Juju Smith-Schuster. But that's my big concern, because we saw how much trouble Corey Davis gave the Broncos secondary. And I think Juju's, similar size, similar strength, but a much better version, much better player than Corey Davis. So I think that's something that's got to concern the Broncos secondary. And I'm with Pat. That secondary is a concern. And Matt, for that extent. Secondary is a big concern.
I would be interested to see. So one of the things that I noticed really was from the defense against the Titans was that the linebackers were staying down more in order to stop Derrick Henry. Without that big threat in the running game.
I was wondering the same thing.
Right. So are we going to see Alexander Johnson in space more in coverage? Because, man, those middle shots absolutely killed us. You're 100% right. Corey Davis, he looked like the first round pick, right? He looked like that guy that everybody thought that he could be, because it was the middle shot. The linebackers weren't dropping back far enough, and that was Derrick Henry. That's the Derrick Henry effect. So without James Conner, without a true rushing attack, Benny Snell is no slouch. I'm not saying that, but he's no Derrick Henry. So you can sacrifice having Alexander Johnson drop back more into coverage to cover that middle, because that was the soft spot. And teams like Pittsburgh, teams like Kansas City, they are going to take advantage of that. They're going to take full advantage of that space in the middle being vacated by the linebackers, and that's going to eat us apart. So something's got to change, and that's where that concern with the secondary comes in, because we saw Justin Simmons had trouble covering that middle part of the field, and he gave up a lot. So are we going to see that again this week? I don't know, maybe, but you're definitely right. Key on the Steelers receivers if you're in fantasy, because they're probably going to eat this week.
And I think too, as far as expecting, where are we at even with the interior of the defensive line? Can they go out and perform? Because I think that with even the pressure, one guy that really we hadn't even touched on, is Malik Reed, and he had a really, really quiet game on Monday night from at least what I saw. And so I just think that if you're looking at it from at least that pressure point, or at least from the pass rush point, Reed has to come out and ball out this week, because whether it's going to be a Tachu that ends up solidifying that extra spot for a pass rush, or the Broncos do what they probably had already done and reached out to Clay Matthews and Terrell Suggs, or not Terrell Suggs yet, but Cameron Wake. They have to make sure that they solidify that position rather early in the season. And so I just think that with that type of pressure, they have to find out if they can put a lot of that pressure on Big Ben, and whether that's going to come from Draymond Jones or Shelby Harris, who also had a really good game along with Jarrell Casey and others.
Yeah, and the Steelers, it's important to note that the Steelers are dealing with offensive line injuries. As far as bringing in that veteran, Albright hit it really hard on the head today and just said, it's not worth bringing in guys that are not very familiar with the system. I feel like right. And it's like, it would be one thing if we traded for a really proven guy like Ryan Kerrigan. Just throwing it out there, his price tag has gone way up after last week. But I think bringing in Isaiah Irving is just more of a, let's get guys in here that actually know the system and know the scheme a lot better than just saying, okay, we gotta do something. Let's just bring in Cam Wake, because I think that, we have to pump the brakes a little bit, and we have to look at what we have. Bradley Chubb was not the most dominant guy on the field against Tennessee. There were a couple times where I saw him actually get frustrated on the field because he wasn't getting that pressure. And you're right. Malik Reed has to have that showing. Go ahead, Zach.
Sorry. Didn't mean to cut you off there, Patrick.
No, you're good.
I think
you're good.
Chubb, love you, Patrick. Chubb was against Taylor Lewan, and that's, I think that's part of the difficulty there. Hopefully it's better this week, but the Steelers offensive line's nothing to sleep on. I think you're right though, Cam. That pressure is a big question mark. It's got to be, someone's got to step up, and Atachu stepped up a bit in the Titans game. I mean, if you get that even if you combine Atachu and Malik Reed's stats, and you get what he was on pace for after one game, which won't happen. You can't extrapolate one game over 16 and expect that to be the case. But if he plays at that level, you'd have 80 pressures and 16 sacks. If you get that from the spot replacing Von Miller, you're happy. So it needs to step up. I don't know who it's going to be. Maybe it was Atachu last week. But it's got to be more than just that. It's got to be the interior defensive line. It's got to be Chubb. It's got to be Malik Reed some of these weeks. So that's a concern. But my big thing to watch in the upcoming Steelers game is on the other side of the ball. And one of the guys who got the game ball, Noah Fant. I want to see what he does in the 2019 10th overall pick showdown, Devin Bush versus Noah Fant. I'm really excited to see that one. And then also Minkah Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmonds helping over the top. That's another tough task. And not to say the Titans are slouches with Jayon Brown and Kenny Vaccaro and Kevin Byard, but Steelers are going to be tough too. And I'm excited to see what Fant does, maybe with Sutton to give him a little cover and a little help.
I can't wait to see Noah Fant stiff arm Minkah Fitzpatrick because that seems to be a recurring theme. Week after week, that guy is just having a really tough time of it. I think that he's a great part of that Steelers secondary, and I do think that the Steelers overall are going to have the more aggressive defense against this offense. But Drew kind of touched on it today in his conferences, and he talked about how fast that defense goes, and they played really well against the Giants. I really want to see Fant against Bush. I want to see people on Facebook cry because, the guy that they wanted got exposed by the guy that they didn't want. And that'll just make me happy because I'm a petty person.
Well, see, I was going to say, you say stiff arm Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think it would be that poster to see Noah Fant, stiff arm Devin Bush. I think that would be like the meme picture for Twitter.
Oh, it absolutely
to spin him like he did Jermaine Whitehead. Not even the stiff arm, just the lowered shoulder. I'm going to make you look like you're doing a cartwheel.
Gee whiz! That would be. I do expect Fant to have a big game. If Cortland's back, because and especially if we have Hamler too. I mean, that's an entire part of the offense that we didn't even touch on. Because that speed threat, and we saw what happens when you force Minkah to look one way and you put some burner in the slot on the other side, it's game over, man. But again, Locke has to be able to make that throw. He's got to be able to put that touch on the ball. I don't think that Hamler would have any problem going and getting it because the guy runs like a 4 flat. But yeah, I am excited to see. I'm excited to see what this offense can do against this defense because they seem to have more weapons than Tennessee has right now, as far as the defensive front, as far as linebackers, and as far as secondary, this Steelers team looks to be a lot more complete right now than Tennessee's does. So it's going to be a real test for the offensive line, for Drew Lock, and for these receivers.
What are you looking forward to, Matty?
Well, I kind of hit on the receivers, but yeah, definitely the pass protection for sure for the Broncos is something I'm really worried about, because TJ Watt right now, kind of a hot take. I would say that he's as good right now as his brother kind of ever was. And people just don't talk about it. Look, JJ was a stud. He won Defensive Player of the Year a ton. A lot of it, like his name, lately has – what's that?
At his prime, JJ was like Aaron Donald level, just like dominant game record. I'm with you. TJ's phenomenal, maybe Defensive Player of the Year this year, but like JJ Watt was in that like Reggie White, JJ Watt, Aaron Donald, Lawrence Taylor, like dominant defensive tier for a moment. There was argument when Aaron Rodgers was at his peak that JJ Watt was the best player in the league, not Rodgers. But sorry, I didn't
hear you. No, I hear you. I said it was a hot take. I knew it was a hot take. But the thing is, like, that defense is so good. Like, the secondary doesn't get beat quickly. It allows a lot of time for that pass rush to get there, and it gets there pretty fast in its own right. And they can't just tee off on him because they have other guys that can get home too. Like that guy, nobody talks about him really. He's just he's just the younger Watt. He's just the little guy, right? Mm-hmm. He's not just a little guy anymore. Like that guy will wreck your whole offensive scheme if you let him. So I'm very interested to see what that looks like. And Bowles should be lined up on him a lot. So we should really see what that looks like. So I guess like hopefully we don't get torched by the receivers on one side and then the pass rushers on the other.
Well, but two, even with the pass protection is, of course, that other guy. That's not TJ Watt.
Yeah.
It's Bud Dupree.
The meanie head.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about TJ Watt, but that's just only going to open the door for Bud Dupree potentially to go wild. But no, yeah, it was a really good show. With you guys, and potentially maybe some early predictions for you guys, maybe.
Oof, Zach, you go ahead and take that.
You want me to go?
Yeah, you go ahead.
I think we're going to have another overreaction Monday because the Broncos are going to be 0-2, but I just think it's because the Steelers are the third best team in the AFC. You got the Chiefs, you got the Ravens. Steelers are that third team in my mind. Great defense. Big Ben looks like he's back. You got the weapons at receiver. I'm saying Steelers. I still think the Broncos defense is great, though. So I'm going to say Steelers 24, Broncos 14. I think it's kind of another long day for the offense. Defense plays well. You don't get those missed kicks, though. So 24-14.
Yeah, I'll probably go with that same route. I think I'll go 27-17 to counter your double fours there. I think that our concerns about the Steelers offense are real. Our concerns about the Steelers defensive front are real. So really the offense has to come out for the Broncos. The offense has to come out swinging early. Getting Cortland back and being able to utilize his size and his catching ability is going to be huge. But overall, like Zach said, this team is severely underrated. I feel like not a lot of people look at them as a legitimate threat in the AFC, but they are. The truth is that they are. So I'm going to go 27-17 Steelers over the Broncos.
This is probably a bad time, Zach and Pat, to say that I picked the Cincinnati Bengals to go to the playoffs.
Yikes, Cam.
Oh, no. Come on.
I don't hate that yet. Hey, I don't hate that yet. They're a OPI away from being 1-0, and I think they'll beat the Browns on Thursday night.
I hope they do.
Well, so and for the sake of continuing, I guess that prediction thing, at least for me, I would have to just say that I think it'll be a lot closer, like the Tennessee Titans game, to where I don't think it'll be like the 27-17 or 24-14. But I think it will be a lot closer, maybe not necessarily a 16-14, but just as far as like a 27-24, 24-20, just those types of games. It's probably too early for me to say as far as where we're at with the week, as far as who's going to win. But as of right now, I think it's going to be a lot closer. I will say that if Hamler is ready to go, I will make a prediction, not a score prediction, but I will say that Hamler will score a touchdown on Sunday.
Will Judy?
I like it.
I say Judy could score a touchdown, but all I want is to see if Hamler scores a touchdown and Judy scores a touchdown. I want to at least see a Hamler and Judy dance in the end zone.
Yes, I agree.
Like Kid and Play?
Yes.
That'd be dope.
How about Judy and Hamler combined for 2 touchdowns? Maybe one gets 2, maybe each gets 1. Who knows?
Let's calm down. All
I
right,
mean,
Matt, what's your
now,
prediction?
Right now, the prediction is Hamler's 0.1% owned and Judy is 2.4% owned on DraftKings for the initial projections. So if that were to happen, somebody could win a ton of money. For me, so I'm the DraftKings guy. I'm also the gambling guy. The total over under is 41.5. I like this game to go over that. I'm taking 27-20 for the Steelers. But with the Steelers laying 7.5, that's, technically the Broncos win that, but that's way too close for comfort. So I would just take the over and then move on about my day. But I think the Broncos lose by a touchdown. It's tough. It's a tough matchup. We're too young. We don't have enough time and chemistry yet. And this is a team that could be, really contending for their division and potentially the AFC. So I don't like it, especially with the healthy Big Ben. Now, if they had, Mason Rudolph, or if they had, the Duck Commander like rocking the show, like it might be different. But I got to go 27-20 Steelers.
Well,
I respect it. I respect it.
Well, boys, it was a really good show.
Yes.
Go ahead, I was going to say, we all got the Broncos losing to the Steelers this week, but just because I won't be on next week, I want to say it. I think the Broncos come back home in week 3, stomp Tom Brady and the Bucs. I really feel good about that game. Feel bad about
Tom
week 2.
Brady
feel real good about week 3.
He can't do it.
He's Goskowski.
Yeah. There's something going on. There's some light in the end zone somewhere that just flickers just enough.
Well, I'll say to my credit, I didn't exactly predict who would win. I just said that it would be 24-20, 26. So I didn't say who would win.
All right.
I left that door open. But it was a really good show. It was a really good show with you guys. And obviously this is not going to be the end of it. I mean, we're going to have you two on for, I don't know, as often as you guys would like.
Zach and I could talk Broncos for hours.
Oh, no doubt.
We might even have you on the show against your will. So, at this point. So I really appreciate you guys coming on. It was a lot of fun.
Hey, it is a lot of fun, man.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
No, yeah. So, and of course, Pat, Zach, for Patrick, Don Chiotti, and Zach Segars, where can they follow you two?
On Twitter at Patrick Chiotti, PatrickChiotti. You can find my work on, of course, Pro Football Network, with the first pick, and pigskinnut.com.
Yeah, Zach Segars at Zach. That's Zach with a CH_SEGARS. And then go over there, PFN Broncos. We've got tons of great analysis for you every week. New article every day that really dives deep into Broncos stuff. And then also, of course, I'm over at Mile High Sports. I've got more game preview, game recap content over there, including my 3 Up, 3 Down series where I look at 3 Broncos that improved their stock, 3 that hurt it after each game. So go check those out.
And for myself, you can follow me over on Twitter at Cameron Parker PO, no underscores. And you can go follow Maddie at Maddie Moles Pod. This has been another edition of the Manely Broncos Podcast.